the relative import and of those two domains. Let's say the poetic and the fictional, and the rational,
and the status of religion now in that.
Well, I have a hard time reconciling that to some degree with your more what would you say, formal statements about the problem, because your mechanism, the mechanism that you put forth above all, outside of truth, is rationality. And it isn't clear to me if you're willing to allow the utility of spiritual experience, which you do, and if you're willing to make, what would you say, allowances for the necessity of the poetic imagination, exactly how it is that is also encapsulated under the rubric of pure rationality. See, and here's something, you can tell me what you think about this, and I've been thinking a lot about what Sam and I have been talking about, by the way. So I'm making the case in my writing that democratic institutions not only grew out of the Judeo-Christian substrate, but that they're properly ensconced within that substrate. But I'm also perfectly aware that not every religious or poetic system gives rise to democratic institutions, first, and also that there are Christian substructures, maybe the most obviously in the case of the Russian Orthodox Church, right, where the same metaphysical principles apply, but out of which a democracy did not emerge. And so it does seem to me that what we have in the West is the consequence of the interplay between the fantasy-predicated, poetic Judeo-Christian tradition and the rational critique that was aimed at that by the Enlightenment figures. And that seems to me to mirror something like the proper balance between the right hemisphere and its poetic imagination and the left hemisphere and its critical capacity. And then I would say that part of the way, so one of the questions you brought up was, how do we decide which, let's say, religious intuitions are valid? And I think we do that in part through negotiated agreement, because people have, look, even among the Catholics, say in the medieval time, there was an absolute horror of heresy. So if you were some mendicant monk and you had a profound religious vision, the probability that you were going to be tried as a heretic and burnt at the stake was extremely high, because even the gatekeepers of the religious tradition realized that religious revelation untrammeled by something like community dialogue, something like that, was something of extraordinary danger. And so I would agree with you that the poetic imagination and the ground of religious revelation is something that can lead people dangerously astray. But I would say at the same time that it constitutes the grounds of our initial exploration, and that it's actually ineradicably necessary.
Okay, well, I'll briefly address that, and then I want to ask a question that brings Douglas directly in here. I think this is an instance of what's called the genetic fallacy, the idea that because something emerged the way it did historically, as a matter of historical contingency, it is good, the origin is in fact good and worth maintaining, or that it was in fact necessary, that we couldn't get these good things like democracy any other way, or were unlikely to. And I would say that there's no Abrahamic religion that is the best conceivable womb of democracy or anything else we like, science.
That's a great place to get Douglas involved.
Yeah. So, but I would just add one other category of thinking here. We have what we think is factual and methods by which we derive facts. And I would put rationality there and an empirical engagement with reality. Then we have other good things in life, like fiction and flights of fancy that are pleasing for one reason or another, and could be generative toward the first category. But then we also have, I would acknowledge, and we've spoken about this before, useful fictions and cases, I would hope rare cases where fiction is more adaptive or more useful than the truth, right? That sometimes the truth can be not worth knowing. And I would argue that there are those cases,
okay,
but they're few and far between.
We should focus on that to some degree.
Yeah, so I wanted to just point to Douglas here and focus on that, because I think your fear, Douglas, is that my style, or Richard Dawkins' style, or Christopher Hitchens' style of anti-theism, just let's just throw the vicars from the rooftops now, because it is time to end this thing. Not literally. Get off Twitter now, but.
That's a hashtag, if ever I heard one.
Yes. Your concern has been that, and I think Jordan shares this, that so much of what is good in our Western developed societies is, at the very least, maintained by maintaining so-called Judeo-Christian values, or the remnants of
I believe
curiosity, and that there is a baby in the bathwater that can be difficult to discern, and we can't empty the tub all at once, and this is very much because there's a zero-sum contest with the religious enthusiasm we see coming from the Muslim world, and of course the Muslim world is all over the world at the moment. So in that contest between an older style of religiosity and theocracy really, and modernity, you are not as eager as I have been to pull up Western religiosity by the roots.
Or chuck the vicars.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's fair. I mean, I think I sit metaphorically as well as literally between the two of you. I realized from our conversation in Dublin some of what your concerns are about what Jordan has been saying and what he is saying, and I share some of the concern. I said to you then that I used the analogy of what our friend Eric Weinstein recently described to me as Jesus smuggling. That it was a consequence of a discussion about biologists. What do you do if you're discussing design, intelligent design? You can be okay as long as your own bandwidth on the issue, as long as your own depth of knowledge on the issue is very considerable. You can be okay discussing that biology with somebody, even a fundamentalist Christian, so long as you can follow every step of the way. But the fear will always be that the moment you're not looking, they're going to smuggle Jesus in. Or they'll wait till the moment that you're not comfortable anymore with the argument, the bit when you're at the very end of your cognitive ability, and then they'll, trust me.
There's Jesus. Yes.
There's Jesus. Yeah. And one of the things I realized from Dublin was, although I think you may not think that Jordan himself is going to try Jesus smuggling on you, you fear that somewhere down the line from what he's saying, somebody else will do that trick.
Yeah, it's worse than that. I actually know the people who are clapping are doing that. I hear from those people on a daily basis, right? So that the segment of Jordan's audience that is very happy to be told they can stay on the riverbank of their traditional Christianity for the most part, and they don't have to get into the stream of totally modern, rigorous, rational thinking about everything from first principles, right? That there's something that the Iron Age scribes got right, and it's right for all time. Those are the applause I'm hearing, and however consciously or not, Jordan is telling them it's okay to stick right there with a shard of the cross.
Okay, well, in Dublin, I
wow, wow, wow. Talk about the intellectual firepower on the stage there in London that night. Incredible, folks. Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Douglas Murray in the middle, moderator, and the concept came up of Douglas Murray talking about, Jesus smuggling. And then Sam Harris talking about, chucking the bikers, off the rooftops or whatever. So you definitely have a situation here where you've got Jordan Peterson, who I guess has now re-examined or has come, I think previously, obviously from a Christian background, I believe sort of reevaluating his Christianity and is speaking about it. And then I think you've got Douglas Murray, who is probably more on the agnostic, like sort of in the middle, and then Sam Harris, who's like, completely against it. And so the whole fact of the matter, as far as I'm concerned, is what these three were basically, the essence we're boiling into, is that I believe that Jordan Peterson is saying that we shouldn't just throw everything out, that even superstition has a place in society. Even atheism, agnosticism, religion, they all have a place in society. And whether or not you care to believe in those things, whichever it may be, they shouldn't be just, chucked aside, so to speak. Whereas Sam Harris is basically saying there is nothing that ever came good. If I distill it down, Sam Harris' position, I mean, he may say that that's not true, but I firmly believe, it's my opinion, that Sam Harris's position is that really nothing really came from religion, because there was no religion to start with. This is all just fabricated stuff. There was just man-made stuff. So when they're talking about civilizations or democracy coming out of the bosom of Judeo-Christian philosophy, Judeo-Christian thought, to form these democratic institutions that we now live in, Sam Harris basically says, I don't think that's true at all. There was nothing theocratic about the democratic institutions that came up. It was all coming through the Enlightenment period, and everything else were all stories, from the common man or even from those within the so-called establishment church of the time. Anyways, just some food for thought. Very powerful insights from these three intellectual giants, so to speak. And like I said, we can agree with their opinion. You don't agree with him. I don't agree with Jordan Peterson on a lot of things. I don't agree with Douglas Murray on a lot of things. But I would say I agree with Jordan Peterson on probably, I'd say, 90% of the things. Douglas Murray, I agree with 90% of the things. Sam Harris, I don't know where my percentages would be, but I don't know right now. If you had to ask me a number of things that I believe in Sam Harris, or I'd lean to some of his positions, 15, 20% maybe, only because of his views on religion are pretty contrary to what mine are. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir, and if you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. Smack that button if you would. We'd certainly love it, only if we've earned it and you like our content. Check out our other videos here and below. I'll leave with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.